What is the biggest dating WTF you've experienced? Beehive girl. She had a Marge Simpson hairdo, about 18 inches high. She was an actor and couldn't understand why roles would demand she cut her hair, so she turned them down. I went on 3 dates with her just to hear her stories. She was totally oblivious she was the problem. It was like I was watching a soap opera or something, but she was serious. My ex in HS asked me to shave every last hair on my body, like everything except for my eyebrows. I refused, so she dumped me. She is now married to a guy with alopecia. No joke. I once got catfished on Tinder. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Here's the catch. This person had me meet them and acted as if they were not a different person. One of the craziest experiences of my life. A girl I had been seeing for a couple of weeks or so asked me to go with her to a funeral of some guy I didn't know. What I didn't expect was that the funeral was for her fiance. Got out of there real quick once I realized why everyone was shooting me glares the whole time. I was the side itch. 1. She was so wrapped up in her phone that she didn't notice I had moved over and started a conversation with some other guests. 2. Asked if she could bring a friend to feel safe. Completely understandable and I was fine with it. Brought her best friend and her date. Both girls ignored us pretty much all night and we left without them. He turned out to be a pretty cool guy though and invited me to join for weekend football where I made even more friends. Edit. While this blew up overnight, I will try to respond to everyone over the rest of today. I went on a Tinder date with this one girl whose bio said something like, "You won't like me. I'm a disaster." Spoiler alert. She was right, but she was pretty attractive, so we went to get tea at a local hipster joint. She was obviously depressed. She told me about her hyper-competent other personality that she sometimes slipped into and how her current life goal was to move several states away from her family and work at a gas station, even though she was a senior bio major. As the date was ending she freaked out, saying that she forgot her backpack in her last class but doesn't have a car to get back. Apparently her mom dropped her off and then went home, half an hour away in the suburbs. So I took her to get her backpack. Then she told me that she needed me to drive her to her house because it was late and no bus was running out there. So I drove her half an hour back to her parents' house in the suburbs. On the way she told me that she actually has a boyfriend but sometimes likes to see what's out there and that this what our date was. Oh, and she also is pretty sure she's a lesbian but likes the power involved in getting a guy to like her. For some reason we never saw each other again. Girl told me within 15 minutes of our first meeting that she was having sex with a married co-worker and her favorite part was seeing him cry in guilt after it was over. I once went on a date where I probably said like 5 words. Girl just talked for over an hour and a half, without ever including me in the conversation. Just reminisced, complained, and bragged about her life for over 90 minuets straight. I was so taken aback that I just kind of drove home wondering if that experience was real or not. I've been on and off the dating app life for a couple of years now. I just got my first big boy job and moved to a new area. I matched with this cute girl who was a junior in college nearby. We had a nice first date, got coffee and walked around. We set plans to grab lunch that weekend. During lunch we decided to go on an impromptu hike. I drove us to my house to grab some water, snacks, change clothes, and we had a nice hike. Everything was going pretty darn well. We texted and kept up throughout the week. That Friday I was at a friend's house. We had a few drinks, so I didn't feel comfortable driving back home. He didn't have an Android charger and my phone was dying, so I sent a courtesy text to her to let her know I was going to be out of commission for a while. The next morning, I get home and charge in my phone. After a few seconds I get a slew of text messages, around 50, all from her. It was a spiral into insanity. At first she told me to go have fun and have a good night. Then it went from that to, "Hey, are you free too? So why aren't you talking to me?" And near the latter she mentioned she drove by my house and didn't see my car. She accused me of sleeping around. Basically any and every insecurity got projected onto me within a couple of hours, all while I was asleep. I called it off immediately. She probably had some deeper issues and I hope she has gotten help, is happy. It was just the transition from a few nice dates to that night that really made me take a step back and go, what the actual duck. Had a Tinder date and the guy brought his GF and asked for a threesome without saying a word about it in advance. In my JC days had a girl invite me over for a study date. Her dad was home and we actually studied at the kitchen table. Dad seemed cool from the little bit of conversation we had. Aside from a 7-11 run for snacks and cigs, her dad was 10 feet away from us the whole time. I thought the date went well. We talked more than we studied, made tentative plans to see a movie. Couple days later I text her, "What's your weekend looking like so we can check out a flick, grab some dinner?" She replies back, "It's not going to work, she wants someone more forceful." I was like, what? Apparently her running to her bedroom a few times for things she forgot was a hint to me I was supposed to follow. And pounce, I guess. On 2 separate occasions, I've gone home with a guy after a perfectly lovely first date to find an array of BDSM toys laid out on the bed, ready for use. Don't get me wrong, I'm generally down. But you can't just spring that on someone. Guys, there has to be a discussion before you bring out a leather hood and the Flogotron 3000. In both cases, there was no second date. I was 17. My boyfriend was 20 or 21. We were out to dinner at a fancy place with his parents. He loudly turned to me and said, "By the way, since you won't sleep with me, I'm ducking other girls." With his parents inches away, that dinner became incredibly awkward after that. I was a virgin and wasn't ready yet. On a 3rd or 4th date I went back to his apartment to have a glass of wine. We had a great evening until near the end he said, "Wow, I can't believe you passed almost every test." Turns out he set up his apartment with small girlfriend tests. He made sure there was little to no toilet paper to see if I would change the roll, if I rinsed my dishes, if I turned off lights behind me, where I put my jacket and shoes. Needless to say, there were no further dates. This was while I was in the Marines. I met up with this girl from POF. All seemed well from our chats and texting, so we decided to meet up for a date in Palm Springs. Nothing out there yet. I get there to find out she has kids, which she brought along but never told me about even having kids whatsoever, and without missing a beat, she asks me right there to have a contract marriage. I spit my drink out a sap while she tried to explain how it would benefit the both of us. I just looked at her with a stern look, told her to get her it together, told her to lose my number, and walked the hell out. She had previously told me how irresponsible her sister was. Her sister had received a positive result for herpes. Sister thought it meant she was clean and didn't have it. I don't get the logic either. A few weeks later, we had been seeing each other pretty casually. She mentions that her sister wanted to swap. Yeah, no thanks. I had been dating this guy for about a month, and I knew he was pretty freshly out of another relationship. We were having beers on a patio at a tap house nearby, and his phone rings and he answers it and proceeds to talk to who I realized was his ex. They were arguing and talking about their breakup, all while he was still sitting at the table with me. After about an hour and a few beers later, a guy at the table next to me gave me kind of a nod to join his table. I did. We talked about what an arsehole the other guy was being. We spent the next couple hours chatting. Douchebag left when his phone call was over, and my new friend and I ended up dating for a year and we're still friends to this day. I was very new to the city and ended up setting up a date with a girl off Tinder. I spent a lot of time looking into cool bars and suggested a bunch to her, but she ended up really wanting to go to a certain bar. Like, would not take no for an answer. I looked it up. It looked okay. Nothing really that special. I figured she had some sort of thing with the people who worked there where she could escape if the date went bad. Fast forward to the date. It's going really well. She's absolutely gorgeous and the conversation is really easy. I bring up the choice of the bar and why she was so adamant on this one. She said her ex-BF works here. That throws me off. But I figured they broke up a while ago and now are just friends. So I question further, asking how long ago they broke up, and she tells me 2 weeks ago, and that he is currently our bartender. I look over at the bar, and this massive 280-pound guy is giving me the biggest death stare. I was wondering all night why he was being a D to me. Now I understood. Got out of there pretty quickly after that. I think I was like 17 or 18 at the time. We were fooling around. He starts sucking on my nipple and says, in a baby voice, "Baby wants his milky." Showed up for my date with Ashley, who I'd been chatting with back and forth online. This was 10 years ago. Sat down at bar. Someone comes and sits down next to me and says, "Hi, I'm Ashley." Looked at photo of what I assumed was Ashley and her ex-boyfriend and realized the person sitting across from me was the ex-boyfriend in the photo. And that is how, as a straight man, I showed up for a date with a man. After I somehow politely told the guy he was misleading and that he knew I thought she was the girl in picture and what he was doing was deceitful and a good way to get his ass kicked. He had the gall to respond that, "It's okay. We can go after chicks together and if we strike out we can both still have a good time." That is when I told him to go himself and left. TLDR. Accidentally showed up for a date with a dude. Another Tinder story for the pile. Met a girl on Tinder who was super into Bob's Burgers and we hit it off on other things we both enjoyed. First 2 dates we went out to eat and watch a movie. Third date she came over to my place and we ordered pizza and watched Bob's Burgers. Things were going alright until I started getting tired and started the time to use my force powers to get this person to leave so I can sleep portion of the night. I had no expectations of her staying the night and didn't try to push towards it at all, but she started getting very handsy and one thing led to another and she was giving me head. IT was pretty mediocre but I could tell she wasn't that into it and was literally just doing it so I wouldn't have her leave. She was watching the ducking show through her hair and after a few minutes of conversation told me she was only dating me to watch this damn show cause her ex cut her off his Netflix. I had a girl set a whole thing up where she was straddling me in panties only to ask to lick my eye. And, she added, she had a contact kit and stuff so it was safe. So she made a plan to lure me to her place, seduce me, all with the end goal of licking my ducking eyeball. She was hot too. Being an idiot and in high school I left. I wish I'd banged you, freaky eye lady. I went on a very boring date with a very dull, not talkative girl. I tried every couple of minutes to initiate any conversation until I honestly ran dry of something or anything to talk about and decided that it really isn't going to work, so I sat in silence while I finished my drink with complete intention of saying goodbye once I'd finished. 2 sips left and she said something. I kid you not, these were her words. "So are you going to kiss me at the end of this?" I was in shock and didn't know what to say. She then proceeded to cry and get up saying, "I knew I was ugly," and walked away. A year ago I met up with a girl I met on a dating site. We went out for coffee and had a good talk about movies and video games. Then everything got weird when she asked if she could read me some of her poetry about her ex-boyfriend cheating on her. She proceeded to sob in public in the middle of the poem and wouldn't stop until she was finished with her very long poem despite being a blubbering, sniffling mess. There was no second date. This guy went on and on about how he hated promiscuity and whores. Later on that night, he tried to go up my shirt and touch my breasts. I stopped him and said, "I thought you hated promiscuity." IT wasn't my date so much. She actually ended up becoming my wife. It was the 20 minutes leading up to our first date. I ran a bar. She was a bartender. Cheesy as all hell. Yes, but you don't ignore the hot Swede who has just started working for you. The bar was in a dodgy part of town and there was a barber shop next door that was a well-known front for a local crack dealer. And we had all kinds of problems with him parking his piece of it pimp whip outside our doors. The day of the date we had just installed duck-off big steel bollards to block our doors. I hadn't been working that day so was completely ignorant to the grief this had caused. So come the evening I'm strolling to the bar to meet this cute girl for a date and our neighbor very politely asks me for a quick word. Obviously this was a not good thing, but head office was all about us making efforts to connect with the community, and I walked in expected to lose another bottle of rum to pay for some vegan convenience, so when he locked the doors I suddenly got a bit worried. Now I can't quite remember, or at the time understand, what he said, but the general gist was you duck with my parking, I duck with you, and he pulled out either a machete, or at least its angry little brother, and proceeded to chase me round the barber shop, which is why, 2 minutes before our date was due to begin, my future wife saw me fling myself, as if caught in an 80s action movie explosion, over the wall, having burst through my neighbor's back door, land on my head, pick myself up, dust myself off, stroll nonchalantly in through the doors and collapse on the bar. I've had several Honestly, I'm beginning to think I attract the weird ones. 1. A girl showed up pregnant, like, about to burst. I'm pretty sure the fetus attempted to shake my hand. At no point during the pre-date talks did she tell me she was preggo. I immediately got up and left. 2. A smoking hot redhead went out with me and spent the entire time on her phone. We maybe said 2 sentences to each other. I figured she was disappointed in how I looked acted etc. So I counted it as a loss and left. Next day, she texted me asking when we could meet again. I told her no. 3. A girl showed up to our date visibly high on some kind of downer. Maybe pills? She nodded off at our table. 4. A girl got pissed drunk on our second date. Started an argument with me. Threw her drink in my face. Called me the N-word, I'm white, and demanded that I drive her home. When I told her to take an Uber, she told me she didn't have enough money to afford one. I paid for it. Some guy took my glasses, ran out of the restaurant with them. I got a text like 15 minutes later of him taking a selfie in them at his place. He said if I wanted them back I would have to come over to his. The second date I had with this fairly attractive girl who, after a few drinks, proceeded to talk about how she was curious about scat play, ran away like my hair was on fire. I've posted this story before, but I literally ate my pants on a Tinder date, which was a pretty big WTF moment. I should firstly clarify that I didn't hit myself in front of her at the table or anything like that. It's not like we were perusing the wine list when I thought to myself this is going almost too well. I should probably add myself to make things interesting. No, I was in the bathroom, standing at the urinal just pissing away, and I thought I'd let a sneaky little fart out. Well, you can probably guess the rest. Spoiler alert, it was not a fart. It was poo. Fecal matter. A turd. My own body had deceived me. When I was at my most vulnerable, I scuttled into the nearest cubicle to assess the damage and commence Operation Cleanup. Thankfully, it wasn't too bad and I was able to clean myself and my jeans to a reasonable enough standard. Having said that, sadly the underwear didn't make it. They got slam dunked into the toilet cistern to become someone else's problem at a later date. Then, I calmly went back to the date as if nothing had ever happened. She didn't notice, or if she did she was too polite to say anything, although she was Australian, so I find that pretty doubtful. Funnily enough, I actually dated this girl for a few months after that. Whilst I'm certainly no Casanova, to this day it remains one of the proudest moments of my life that I managed to eat my pants on a first date and still get the girl. Take note, fellas. Just told my husband this story recently when we were driving around the town we grew up in and reminiscing about our teen years. There was a guy who I'd seen around town, usually across the street from a bus stop I used often, that I thought was super cute. I wound up meeting him a couple of years later at mutual friend's backyard BBQ and he was cool and remembered me from that bus stop. Apparently he'd been into me from afar then too, and we decided to move to the front of the house to speak privately and possibly make out. Well, he was super drunk, and we talked and sat next to each other on the front steps, and as the conversation dwindled and our faces moved closer to kiss, inches away from each other, he turns and vomits like a fire hose between his legs. I tried to comfort him a bit and then went back to the party and left shortly after. He felt terrible and asked me out later and I said duck it. Let's not totally blow this guy off. Everyone gets super drunk sometimes. Sure, but his idea of a date was taking me to a graveyard in broad daylight to get drunk, and I realized he was very, very dumb and I never spoke to him again. I had a date suggest we meet up for drinks. He showed up about 10 minutes late, 2 sheets to the wind. He orders another whiskey and then for about 20 minutes tried to carry on conversation without acknowledging the fact he was clearly incredibly drunk. I casually asked if he drank beforehand and he told me he had a bunch of whiskey beforehand in preparation for the date to calm his nerves. Okay, I get it. Then he continues to explain that he's only drunk because I'm pretty and that he was so eager to make a good impression he decided to drink. Then he puked. Needless to say, the whiskey did not make a good first impression. I'm a black guy. It'll be important later. I met a slightly older white woman on OKC. We hit it off really well and had about 3 dates. On the 4th date she invited me over because she wanted to cook for me. Leading up to the date our texts started getting pretty sexual. I thought for sure this date was going to be our first time doing the do. The date comes and I even buy a new shirt. I get to her place and she shows me around the apartment. She takes me to the bedroom and in her bed is another guy. I'm thinking maybe she has a roommate and this is his room. She immediately tried to explain it to me when she saw my WTF reaction when she introduced the guy as her husband. The truth is, she was in an open marriage and they were into cuckolding. She told me that it normally scares the guys off if she brings it up right away and that a few dates with guys she interested in has been more successful. After being explained what they planned that night I respectfully declined and left. As I walked out her husband called me a pussy.